Okay, YouTube says we're live. Welcome, everybody. I am Ardwulf, and joining me is delicious Dan Pancaldi from the wintry halls of Canada, even though it's not winter right now.
No, it's not.
So our topic for the evening has been randomly chosen as tactical war games. I sent Dan an email earlier, and I said, hey, what's our topic tonight? And he said, your sister's ass. So tactical war games it is.
Actually, that was a great joke. Great joke.
So, yeah. I'm so funny. It's great. So, anyway. So, welcome, everybody, to the show. Tactical War Games. I figure we would start with sort of talking about, like, the history of Hex Encounter tactical games, right? Now, tactical, of course, is a term that is relatively easy to define. Strategic is relatively easy to define. Operational is very difficult to define without referring to tactical or strategic or both, which is one reason why I haven't done a show on operational games, even though that's what I personally tend to like.
So what would be the scale of operational?
Well, that's a good question. It kind of depends, right? So even tactical, right? In the context of tactical, in World War II context, tactical has meant man-to-man in a few cases. There's not that many individual man games really in any period. There's a few, but not that many. Douglas Gerhardt and Ken Kloby, thanks for stopping by. For World War II, it's generally meant squads or platoons, sometimes companies. You can get into things like, say, Day of Days from SCS or the Grand Tactical Series. Those are company scale games, and there's of course CSS, the company scale system from Compass, which is kind of an evolution of the GTS game. Those certainly I think count as tactical games, but they have some operational feel because they're kind of on the edge of
what about the other Chad Jensen game there, Deutsch Grossland, Fighting Formation?
Oh, Fighting Formations. I've never played that. I'm not sure what scale that's at. I know there's video on YouTube about it. I think Marco did a video review of it, and it's got a good reputation.
Yeah.
But it's also something I've seen sitting around a lot. That's a good point. So let me mention actually that the GMT sale is happening right now. The annual GMT, or at least the GMT summer sale. I don't know. Maybe they'll do this again in the fall. Who knows? But so for anybody who has pre-ordered some stuff from GMT in the last year, and even if you haven't, you can still order one game for 50% off, which is a great price. I mean, I've seen cool games on their website for as little as $17.50. I of course have them already, but that's a problem that I had, and I would have ordered counter trays if they had counter trays, but they're out of counter trays again.
So what's the criteria? If you've ordered anything on P500, one thing, you're allowed what?
So anybody, whoever can get one game at 50%, one thing at 50% off. This is GMT stuff and not the other companies like Hexasim and stuff that the UGG that they sell as well. But then for every P500 thing, and there's a list on the memo from Gene of specifically what qualifies. I think I qualify for 4 things total. So for every thing that you got through P500 from them in the last year or so, you can get another thing at 50% off. Like I said, I looked through it, and there's certainly great stuff available. It's just that I kind of got it all. So you want to hear a terrifying statistic?
Cool.
I own 93 GMT games. That's not expansions. That's not magazines. That's GMT games.
That's a lot.
All but one of which is a boxed game, actually. I think I own one GMT game that was sold as a Ziploc. That is Invasion Sicily.
So you're not Invasion Sicily. That's not Senigalio's game?
No, that's Vance von Voorhees.
Okay. So you're not counting like the great battles of history, easy great battles of history.
No. But the individual games are all standalone, so I count them, right? But like the expansions, like for Caesar Conquest of Gaul, you can get Gergovia. I don't count Gergovia. I don't count Attila for Devil's Horseman. I just count the boxes.
Jeff Beeler's asking, anyone know how much shipping to Canada is? Yeah, Jeff, I know.
I think they might have a Canada, like a semi-Canada friendly shipping rate.
Yeah, no, they do.
So, yeah, I mean, punch the number in and it'll tell you what the shipping cost is before you have to hand money over.
I don't think it's more than $30, man. That's for sure.
Well, that's better than I did when I shipped to Canada. I can tell you that.
I know.
I would hope they can do better than I can. So,
right.
So back to tactical, the exact border. Now on the other hand, you can look at, say, Civil War, right, where tactical has generally been considered regimental, right? There's vanishingly few Civil War games that are at a lower scale than regiment. There's probably a few. There's at least one ridiculous squad level Civil War game that nobody plays and nobody should, but that is the ASL Civil War thing from Critical Hit, which is just bad. It's not bad. It's dumb. That's not a meaningful formation for Civil War. That the squad. No, it's just not. No. It's just not. So, I mean, you could theoretically have a battalion scale game, but then you step back to like Napoleonics, right, where kind of like the detailed tactical system is La Bataille, and it's a battalion scale game. So it actually it fluctuates from period to period, right? Pat Mullen's A Hot Dry Season, which is an operational Vietnam game, and it is an operational Vietnam game. It scales like companies. Because that's operational for that topic. So it does tactical or operational or strategic sometimes, varies from topic to topic.
What about something? Joe Chacon's game,
Front Toward Enemy.
Yeah, that's.
I think that's tactical. I think that's squad level. I think. Don't quote me on that. I think so too. Really looked at that game. So yeah, I mean, so there's a few odds and ends, like where you see like Little Round Top, where it's just Little Round Top, and yeah, you could do that as a smaller scale, but it's just Little Round Top, right? I mean, it's a very laser focused game, and not even on a battle, but on a specific part of a battle. So if you want to even a mid-sized battle like P Ridge, you're not going to see do they even? I mean, I'm not even 100% sure they used battalions in Civil War units. Maybe they did. I don't know. But I just don't see it. Right. So tactical, right. And then of course you got the man-to-man stuff. And there are a few examples, right? City Fight, I think, and Firefight from SPI, I think, were man-to-man. Wasn't Ambush? You played Ambush. Ambush is a single man, right?
Well, no, you have a squad.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, but yes, you have a squad.
Well, yeah, okay. So, but the units are individual dudes, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's what I thought. So that's a man-to-man scale. At that there's not that many examples of that. Platoon for like World War II, like platoon level. There's a fair number of examples. I mean, Panzerblitz, Panzerleader are in that scale. I forget about Old School Tactical. I think that's squads. I could be wrong.
Old School Tactical.
That's from Flying Pig. Beautifully produced series. Sniper is another one that was a single man, as we call it, man on man.
Yeah, squad level.
Yeah, okay, that sounded right. I had that passed through my hands at one point and decided I wasn't going to give it the attention it deserved.
You know these games on Noble Night, what they go for?
Not offhand.
Well, I mean, there was one game, Armageddon War, $300.
Really? Holy cow. Really? I mean, I guess that must be out of print then, huh?
Yeah, it's out of print. $300, man. US, that is.
Let's say hello to all the folks who have joined in. Jeff Beeler, who I think we already said hello to. Richard D. Fortuna, Cal Reese, Charles Latora, Adam, Mr. Tweezers is in the house. Even though it is some obscene hour at where he is. I think we have already mentioned Ambush.
Yeah.
So another thing with the Flying Pig stuff is they're really well produced as far as components go. So that probably makes them appealing. And just that by itself, regardless of the game.
The maps are humongous.
They are enormous. Yeah, I couldn't fit them on. They didn't fit on my ID Gestures here too. Thanks for stopping by. I couldn't fit the damn thing on my table. That's why I got rid of it.
Mounted.
Yeah, and it's mounted. Well, so I had like Old School Tactical, the first one, and it's got like 2 enormous mounted maps. And I didn't get on the Kickstarter. The Kickstarter, you got a third map, like a Stalingrad map too. They're enormous. The maps are like 3 feet wide and like 4 feet long. Enormous.
It's a beautiful thing to look at, man.
So actually, they might be the same size as the what's it called? The Herman Luttman Gettysburg game that's coming.
Oh, man.
The Most Fearful Sacrifice. I think that's the same size.
Did you go for that?
No. It was sort of. Well, we can talk about that later. But it's going to be a really nice game. Let me put it that way. Very high quality components. Yeah, I mean, so my space in Civil War is regimental. I think that's a good place, but certainly battalion. We just talked about that. Like brigade level, there's lots of good brigade level, or even division level, really, Civil War games. But at the divisional level, then you're talking about a game with quite a small number of pieces, or a really big battle, right? Like divisional Gettysburg still has a lot of pieces, but divisional P Ridge would like not be worth playing, right? So
just for me, Artie, can you go down from tactical and go up in a scale, please?
Yeah. So I mean, well, let's take. So there's also like topics like ancient swears, like what is the unit, right? So I mean, if it's a phalanx, then you could say yeah, it's a phalanx, but a lot of these guys are just like bands of skirmishers or something like that, and there's no like name for the unit, which is a thing that came along quite a bit later in a lot of cases, not all of them. But like the Roman legions had a very organized structure, for example. But a lot of the other games, like the Mongols, what did they use? I mean, I don't know. I'm sure they had some kind of command structure, but I don't know what it looked like. I got a game on it. I'll figure it out someday. But like in the context of World War II, okay, you've got, say, your individual man-on-man games, and I'm not sure I could think of a single man where a unit, a game piece is a single man. I'm not sure I could think of an example that's not ambush.
Except the leaders, you mean?
Well, that's true, but they're not the units, right? Those are extra counters that you're using for various things. Then you got the squad level World War II tactical thing, of which is an enormously crowded part of the hobby, right? There's a ton of examples of that. You got your ASLs, you got your starter kit ASLs, you got your combat commanders, you got your old school tactical, you got your lock and load tactical, you got your company of heroes, you got your heroes of Normandy, which I think is squad level, I think. So there's like a million games in that space. Platoon level tactical, there's a few. It's interesting that hasn't been more popular, actually, thinking about it, because Panzerblitz is platoon level, right? And that was a hugely popular game, and there were plenty of imitators, but nothing that's really survived except for Panzer Grenadier, the Avalanche Press series.
We're talking each shit is 5,000 to 10,000 people, like platoon.
Platoons? No, we're talking, what is a platoon? About 100 guys?
Okay, so how come in the rule book of Panzer Leader, this unit here, this mortar unit, it's 11,000 people? Am I wrong or what?
I think you're wrong.
Okay.
I think you're wrong. I've never actually played Panzerblitz. I own it. It's up on the shelf, but I've never actually played it. But the units are not like divisions. Which
okay, I'm mistaken then.
So above platoons, you got companies. Okay, now we already mentioned a bunch of company scale systems. You got the company scale system, which oddly enough is a company scale system. GTS, the Grand Tactical Series. Some of the SCS games are company level. Day of Days comes to mind. It Never Snows, the Market Garden game, that's company scale too.
How big? How many men in a company?
I think it's about 300. So okay. It should be about 30 guys in a platoon. I mean, I'm spitballing this, right? I wasn't in the service. Should be about 10 guys to a squad, about 30, and it's 3-3-3-3-3 all the way up. So it should be about 10 guys to a squad, about 30 guys to, give or take, too. Like the Soviet numbers were different, for example.
Right.
About 30 in a platoon, about 90 in a company, and then about 300 in a battalion. So you'll go up to battalion, which is where for World War II, for most World War II topics, it starts looking a lot like an operational game as opposed to tactical. Company is kind of on the border, so it can be kind of tactical game with operational flavor, or an operational game with tactical flavor, which is how I would characterize GTS personally.
Okay.
Despite the name Grand Tactical, which does not have a precise meaning. It means whatever you want it to mean in the context of whatever you're talking about. So... and then from battalions, you go up to either regiments or brigades, depending on the service you're talking about. And from regiments or brigades, you go up to divisions. Divisions go up to corps. Corps go up to armies. Armies go up to either army groups or fronts. If you're talking about Soviet, the front is the equivalent of a Soviet group. But so one of the things that you notice is, if you play a lot of operational East Front games, not that I know any of those people, is that there's like tons of Soviet units, right? But and the Soviet units are like the average Soviet unit is bigger than the average German unit. So if you play like the Dark Valley, I think the German units are divisions and the Soviet units are corps. But what that doesn't mean is that there's like 3 times as many guys in the Soviet unit. The Soviet regiments were smaller. So when you put those regiments into divisions, their divisions were a lot smaller. So that's actually the reason why.
Okay.
There was rough parity. I mean, the Soviets had more guys, right, in the long run. But like there wasn't like a huge numerical imbalance on the Eastern Front either at any point until like the very like last year of the war. The Germans actually outnumbered Soviet armed forces during the whole Barbarossa phase early in the war, for example. A lot of people don't know that.
Okay.
So, but this, on paper, it looks like, oh, there's these Soviet units are all bigger because, they're Soviets. They're just throwing man after man after man. Right. Well, yeah, they did that, but
near the end.
But the Soviet Corps is a comparably sized unit to the German division. So that's why. Okay. Well, no, I mean, they would throw guys into the meat grinder pretty much the whole time.
Really?
I mean, yeah. I think that's probably overstated to some extent, but they totally did that. I mean, that was kind of the tactic is, this is going to cost us a lot of men. And they did stupid counterattacks too, which certainly was wasteful of manpower. So, and actually that's a good point. E4 Airman mentions, this is true of Civil War II at some scale. So if you look at your average Gettysburg game from the Mark Herman recent Gettysburg game in C3I, which is not a tactical game. I don't know what Mark calls it, but I don't think it's a tactical game. There's like 17 pieces total on the map. Might be 20. I don't know. Something like that. Where the see if I'm doing this correctly from memory. The Union units are corps and the Confederate units are divisions. And there's roughly the same number of Confederate divisions versus Union corps. But the Confederate corps were huge, right? So the Union corps were pretty much 3 divisions. The Confederate corps could have like 6 divisions, and some of those divisions might have like 5 or 6 regiments in them. So they were bigger units at some scales. I think the regiments were of comparable size, generally speaking. But yeah, so that's a thing that you see in a lot of, not all maybe, but a lot of Civil War games, particularly Gettysburg. Of course, we've seen a lot of Gettysburg games.
What are you drinking?
So this is it's an Ohio whiskey. It's called, I don't think you can get it anymore. It's called Ohio. It's pronounced Ohio. And it's from a local distillery called Middle West Spirits here in Columbus, Ohio.
And what's the ABV
Hold on
that?
1 second, because I've unplugged my headset. All right, there we go.
What's the ABV on that?
46%. It's bottled at 46%. And it's made with 100% Ohio wheat. So it's got a lot of wheat character.
Okay.
Which I like, but I'm trying to clear bottle space so I could buy more scotch. Because I want a field trip to Kentucky and drive home with 4 to 6 bottles of scotch at some point.
Well, hold on a second. Kentucky's got bourbon.
Kentucky's got better scotch selection than Ohio does, but that's because Ohio has a crappy liquor selection. Not necessarily Kentucky. Yeah, I mean, so there's a huge like Kmart sized liquor store right across the Ohio River in Kentucky, and they have the bourbon selection there is off the hook, but they still have 3 or 4 times as much scotch, different kinds of scotch as I can get here in Ohio. And the next nearest place I could go is like Chicago, which I'm not, that's like
how far are you
8 hours away.
How far are you from Kentucky?
It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours.
That's it?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm thinking Tennessee for some reason.
Tennessee is south of Kentucky. I've been to Tennessee too. There's plenty of good Tennessee whiskey as well. Tennessee whiskey is bourbon, though. I mean, like Tennessee whiskey, like Jack Daniels, is bourbon. So,
well, hold on. Jack Daniels is a sour mash. Get it right there, bro.
It's bourbon. Tennessee whiskey.
It's whiskey.
It's Tennessee whiskey, which is a subcategory of bourbon. It meets all of the rules for bourbon. The difference is that it's charcoal filtered, which bourbon is not.
I'll tell you another difference there, Artie. It's not 51% corn. So if it ain't 51% corn, it ain't bourbon.
That's true. I think Jack Daniels is 51% corn.
No, it's not.
What? Okay, maybe it isn't. If so, then you're right. It isn't bourbon. I think it is because it's because corn is cheap, just like Jack Daniels. So that's why American beer tastes like it does, because they don't want to buy barley. They use corn and rice.
Yeah, it's pretty like blah, 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 you know.
So
but anyways,
the prices for, we're digressing here, but hey, we do that every week. There's nothing new. The prices on Scotch in Kentucky are comparable to the prices in Ohio. Might be slightly higher, but only slightly. The prices on bourbon are less, at which you'd expect, since that is kind of the industry. That's like literally the home industry of Kentucky. Bourbon does not have to be made in Kentucky either. But there's a bourbon. Middle West makes a bourbon that I actually don't care for personally. I don't think it's that good, but I like their rye whiskey. They have an unaged rye. It's bottled at like 100 proof or something like that. It'll take the top of your head clean off. But it's really good.
Well, so, I'm not a rye guy, man.
I love rye whiskey.
It's too dry.
It's very dry, but I'm a dry person. What can I say? So now this stuff is not. It doesn't have that sweetness that you get with bourbon, though. Like bourbon, that's why bourbon is sweet, because corn is sweet. The wheat is less sweet. I mean, it's all about sugar, right? That's right. You mash some grains up, whatever it is, and release the sugars in some way. Maybe you toast the grains or whatever, and then you put yeast in there and let the yeast eat the sugar, and it turns it into alcohol. I mean, that is the process for all alcoholic beverages. I mean,
the sweetest bourbon I've ever tried, and what we can get here, was Buffalo Trace. But that goes very nice. That goes very nice with a cigar or a pipe, man.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely. I'll agree with that. You know what actually goes very poorly with cigars and pipes is super smoky Islay Scotch. Surprisingly, because you get like a peat smoke conflict. I don't think it works quite as well. 40 Creek Rye I've had recommended to me. If I ever see it, I will buy it. I have never seen it. But actually, again, might be that. So it could be Ohio. Could be the problem there.
Jeff, and my wife is from Nova Scotia, by the way. Jeff, I think you're from Nova Scotia. And she bought, I forget what it's called. I don't know, but there was a really good Canadian whiskey. Really, really good, but I forget.
Wasn't Black Velvet?
Nah, Black Velvet.
I'll have you know, it's up to like $9 a bottle now.
My mother used to give me that when I was 2 years old, when I was teething.
I would not feed that to convicted felons. So what can I say? That stuff is trash. I have a bottle of Crown Royal somewhere, and the Crown Royal rye actually, and it's not bad.
It's fruity, very fruity.
Yeah, it's got probably relatively little rye in it. American rye has to have 51% rye. Canadian rye doesn't have to have any. It just has some rye in it somewhere. Sometimes you'll get it very rye forward stuff, and sometimes you won't. So what this means is I don't buy Canadian whiskey because I don't know which ones are good.
I'll tell you which one. Whatever.
Okay.
Okay. Pappy, the Pappy Van Winkle. First of all, the Pappy was selling for $20. Now it's like $2,000 if you can get it.
So here's the thing with Pappy. It's Buffalo Trace. It's from Buffalo Trace. It's a different mash bill than the regular Buffalo Trace, but it's distilled by Buffalo Trace. It is old. So the younger stuff I think is 8 or 12 years, which is old for bourbon. So it's smoother than your Jim Beam or Jack Daniels type.
But it ain't worth $2,500.
Oh no, by no means. It is. I mean, I think that's it. It's got this sort of mystique about it now. I think it's ridiculously overpriced. So in a state like Ohio, their liquor store is run by the state, right? The state sets the prices, so they can't sell it for $2,000. No. So what ends up happening is the liquor store gets allocated, or maybe they put their name in and they make it allocated 2 bottles, and they do a raffle instead. Where they sell tickets to the raffle for $10.
I see.
And then they make $5,000 on it. And they sell the raffle winner gets a bottle of Pappy 12 or whatever it is. So I don't think. I mean, I haven't had it. Maybe it's like mind-blowingly awesome, but I doubt it. I could buy
You could buy a Napoleon
$75 bottle of scotch. That's amazing. So
yeah, I mean, you could buy for $2,500. You can buy Napoleon cognac for God's sake. You could buy
a car for $2,500.
That's yeah, but who's thinking car here?
Well, still,
Artie, I see some things here. Going back to tactical there.
Mm-hmm.
Time Tripper and
Time Tripper's a man-to-man, and you know it's a unique game too. I don't think anybody else has really tried to do anything like that. So
no. Yeah, you got to get stoned to do a game like that.
Actually, a lot of the GDW sci-fi stuff fits into this category as well.
The stoned category?
No, the tactical category.
Oh, sorry.
John Carter mentions GDW's Asteroid. That's true, but Ashanti High Lightning is man-to-man. And for that matter, if you're talking about small ships on small ships, you could put Mayday in there. You definitely put Snapshot in there. You could even probably put, again, small ships on small ships. You could even probably put Triplanetary or
Triplanetary,
Belter. Yeah, why not? For some reason, every time Compass Games does a live stream, people ask them why are you not bringing out a new version of Belter? And I don't know if that's a joke. Belter is an old sci-fi game that GDW did. It's a neat. I've got it. It's up here on the shelf. It's a neat game. It's about asteroid mining. It's the kind of game that nobody would ever produce now. Not because of the topic, but because it's like real simulationist. So it's like, yes, I have to roll for the market price on the ore that I've just extracted from this. I mean, nobody's going to design a game like that now. Even if it's about asteroid mining, it'll have some work placement thing going. So there is a CNA going on eBay or just went on eBay for near or over $1,000.
What is CNA?
Campaign for North Africa.
For in
the shrink wrap. Which might even be the original shrink wrap.
Would you go for that if you didn't have it?
For $1,000? Absolutely not. I don't think I'd pay $200 for it. Actually, if I saw it for the right price, I would totally buy it. But I think that right price. This is not fair market price. This is what I'd pay for it. I think that price is about $150. That's what I would pay for campaign.
In shrink.
I wouldn't want it in the shrink. I'm well aware that it's going to go for more than $150 in the shrink wrap. I would take a good condition punched copy for $150, but I had confidence was complete.
If you're thinking of resale value, like if you plan to live in another 10 years, you can sell that game for, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm talking about.
You could sell a good condition punched copy of CNA for $400 to $600, I'd say. That's probably a pretty good guess. But it's not worth that to me. I mean, I because I wouldn't want it to resell it. I'd want it because if I wanted to play
I know.
I've got 2 SPI soapboxes. I would buy a third if I find it for the right price. Which is actually about $150. Which is Atlantic Wall, by the way. I've got War in Europe and War in the Pacific. Now I've played War in Europe before, and I'll play it again at some point. Hell, we're actually talking about putting it on the table after NATO. But there's a whole bunch of stuff in the queue for that, so we'll see. And then War in the Pacific, I would like to play. It looks neat. So then again, the Pacific War is coming hopefully by the end of the year. So.
Yeah, I mean, I P500 that, and Mark Herman actually told me, don't buy it, because he knows I suck at games. Don't buy.
Well, Mark has been very, very forward about this is not a game that will appeal necessarily to a lot of the same people that like things like Fort Sumter or even Empire of the Sun, right? I mean, you could play it. I've heard Empire of the Sun described as a monster game. That is, I think, okay. I mean, if that's a monster game to you, that's cool. But it's like you could play it, and it's one map, it's a counter sheet and a half, and you can play it in a sitting. Now, it's long sitting, but you could play it in a sitting, right?
But
you
it's
could
not
play
a monster game.
You could go up to the club in 7 hours. I could play a game of Empire of the Sun. So I agree with Ken. I haven't been highlighting comments here because I forgot I could do that because I'm running the show today. So I think the Big Bang Theory, that CNA was on the Big Bang Theory, it is a factor in its increased desirability now.
Oh, is that why?
I think it's a factor. Yeah, I mean, it's always had something of a an aura of forbidden fruit about it, right? Because it was considered unplayable for a long time. Now, here's the thing, though. And I have not looked at Campaign for North Africa in enough detail to know the answer to this question. But here's a question that I would be curious to know the answer of. If you played it now with a laptop with Excel on it and you could spreadsheet all that logistics stuff, would it be a lot easier to play? I suspect it might be. So what was considered unplayable in 1979 or whatever it was when it came out might not necessarily be considered that unplayable today. Another thing is like a game like, the standards for difficulty have changed since the 70s too, right? Third Reich was considered the pinnacle of complexity back in the Avalon Hill days, and now it's considered like the simplest version of Third Reich. So as opposed to Advanced Third Reich or John Prados' Third Reich, or let alone at World at War with its 250 pages of rules and another 200 pages of charts and accounting documents and stuff like that. Ken mentions that his limit is about 150. I probably paid more than that once or twice, but not very often.
Look at Kurt. Kurt's asking you what version do you want? I think he's got a couple of versions.
The SPI Soapbox is the one I would kind of want. I've got the Goss version, the Decision Games version, and I've played it. I like it a lot, but I'd be curious to have the original because I'd like to actually compare the two. Wise Guy History did a playthrough series of Atlantic Wall, which is, by the way, it's a battalion level D-Day game. Okay, that's an operational scale, and it covers the first month or so of the campaign. Right, unlike the Decision one, which covers the first 3 months of the campaign through the breakout and all that stuff. So, biggest tactical war game. So I think the biggest tactical war game has to be one of the packages from Critical Hit. Like say you put the whole package of the 2-part Omaha Beach together. I think that's the biggest tactical hex encounter thing that I'm aware of. There's the TCS, which is a game we haven't mentioned actually, which I believe is squad level as well. I think. And it's got an Omaha Beach module, but it's like only half the beach, right? The Critical Hit did the other half, did both halves of the beach. So you got the whole thing. There was talk at one point of a TCS companion to Bloody Omaha, but that never materialized. I have heard good things about this series. So I think Ken is talking about the advanced ETO and advanced P. We're talking about completely strategic level games now, by the way, for whatever reason. But hey, this is what people are talking about.
It's what it is.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy to talk about whatever the folks watching want to talk about. I think what Ken is talking about is advanced ETO, advanced PTO, and the expansion for both games that Decision Games released. They've got ferocious reputation for complexity. I've only looked at the PTO rules and they're huge. ETO is out of print and very hard. It's pretty collectible. I think you're probably going to pay $350 for advanced ETO. Advanced PTO you could still get from Decision for something like $120.
Now again,
the expansion I have no idea.
Artie, why when you say it complex because of the amount of detail?
Yeah. It's got it's got over 150 pages of rules. I forget the exact count, but it's a crazy big rule.
But it's funny you say that because I just interviewed Bruno Sinigalio on Time for Trumpets, and man, I didn't find that complex at all, like the rule book.
So I think the rule book for Time for Trumpets is very complex. That does not necessarily mean that the game is. My understanding, and I haven't played Time for Trumpets, so take this for what it's worth, is that Time for Trumpets is very easy to play if you already know how to play Bitter Woods.
Right, that's what he said. But he said he could probably teach me the game in one sequence of play.
That Bruno, he is so optimistic.
Wait, hold on. I don't know how to take that. Is that a shot?
No, not at all. So, but no, I mean, if you know, I've never played Bitterwood, so I'm like, I can't learn how to play this game from this rule book. We'd have to sit down and monkey with it till we got it to work, or I'd have to have somebody teach me how to play it. Why? And we do have a couple of guys that locally who have played it before. A couple of whom have actually played Time for Trumpets too. So there's that.
What's wrong with the rule book for Time for Trumpets?
It's not a learn-in rule book. That's not a problem per se, unless you don't know how to play the game already. So this is a thing that I've been aware of since the late 80s because somebody put it in their designer's notes. There's basically, broadly speaking and reductively speaking, there's kind of two ways to structure a rule book. One is that the rule book is written to teach you how to play the game. The other is to maximize its usability as a reference when you are playing the game. Those are two different approaches to writing rules. One's not more valid than the other necessarily, but it does mean that some rule books that are designed to be reference rule books, which the Time for Trumpets rule book absolutely is, are not good rule books for learning from by reading the rules. If you're the kind of player who learns the game by reading the rule book, I am not that kind of player. I am the kind of player who sets stuff up and starts pushing pieces around and looks stuff up as I go, and eventually I'll figure the game out. But different people, have different experiences and learn differently. So
that's funny because Bruno said he made that game with ease of play in mind.
So Pat says that all tactical war games are an attempt to make minis in cardboard. I'm going to disagree with that. I think there are absolutely some examples of that. That is absolutely true. But if you have a detailed tactical system, then there are going to be very few comparably detailed miniatures rule systems. There are a few. Command Decision, the old GDW miniatures, World War II miniatures, for example, is an example that is a pretty detailed miniatures game. But it's one of the relatively rare examples, and I think it's probably not hugely popular. Oh, this is a good call here on Peter Berg's part. Death Ride, the Death Ride series, not just Curse. That's a whole bunch of Death Ride stuff now. This is a basically platoon level series. So you can imagine Kursk, accounted by some commentators, the largest tank battle in history, played at the platoon level. It's big.
Yeah, it's big.
There are pictures of it floating around set up at Consim World. It's crazy big.
It's big.
Red Barricades. So you could combine Red Barricades with Red October now and end up with an even bigger package, but it's not as big as the Omaha Beach stuff. We already talked about the TCS Omaha Beach. Again, it's big, and I'd love to play that actually. But I will say though that the TCS Omaha Beach, one of the interesting things that TCS has going on is that whole order sheet thing where you got to write your orders out on these op sheets, and you ignore that for the landing sequences. So you're like ignoring that for a good part of the game. So that kind of reduces the appeal of playing that scenario in TCS, I think, which makes it a weird choice I understand why they made that design decision. But if I want to try TCS and I want to play Omaha Beach at the squad level, then maybe that's not a good choice because I'm only going to see one of those things, right? Compass Games, The War, which is another strategic level World War II in Europe. And then there's The War, The Pacific, which is coming out pretty soon, actually. Those look interesting. The only negative thing that I can say about them, not having played them or even looked at them, is that the title makes it impossible to find on BGG because you search for The War and you get 2,000 results.
Yeah. But what's he saying here? What's A3R?
Advanced Third Reich.
Oh, for God's sake.
I don't have that impression, but that doesn't mean I'm right. I am going completely by gut instinct on that.
Well, it sounds right to me.
So you're being congratulated for your interview with Bruno.
Thank you.
Here's Kyle saying it's a great interview.
Well, I mean, I wanted to know the guy.
Adam says it was a good interview.
Thank you, Adam.
And here's Adam, who's agreeing with presumably himself.
Yes, I wanted to know what Bruno. I wanted to know Bruno. What do I know about his games? I wanted to know about the guy. The guy's Italian. He's from Abruzzo, Le Marche. Come on.
Is he actually? I assume he's from Italy, right?
Well, no, he's second generation.
Oh, okay. So, that's a good call, actually. So, Fields of Fire is a solitaire GMT title, and I think it's squad or platoon level. It's kind of got an abstract map where you kind of make the map out of cards. It's got a difficult rule book, that's certainly got a reputation for being difficult. Those people who have learned it seem to swear by it and think it's fantastic. Mike Anthony is totally correct. World at War was the next gen Advanced Third Reich, literally. It is the next Advanced Third Reich with an extra 150 pages of rules. So,
why am I thinking the Australian guys? That's not a World at War.
That's World in Flames. That was mentioned up thread. I think so. I mean, I feel like we've spent just as much time talking about strategic level World War II games.
Yeah.
Maybe that needs to be a topic so we can actually delve into this because I'm prepared to talk about this. I've got a decent amount of experience under my belt of strategic level World War II games. I don't think the current version. Okay, so World in Flames has been around for a long time, and there was a point at which there was a new expansion every year that added a bunch of rules and a bunch of crap, and it got super bloated. And I sold all my stuff because I don't want to deal with it.
Really,
the new edition kind of boils all that down into one core game that includes a lot of the extra stuff as options, and which there are like a limited number of add-ons that you can get to expand that experience or not. You could just not. The current version, as strategic level World War II games go, that are like relatively serious hex encounter simulations, is quite simple and easy to play. Certainly, it is an order of magnitude less trouble to play than a World at War. It might play slower. That's possible.
So why don't I see a lot more people playing that?
There are a lot of people playing World in Flames, actually. It's a lifestyle game. I mean, there's probably as many people playing with as playing World at War.
It's a lifestyle game.
Yeah, absolutely. I know people who play Wilf exclusively, and don't never touch anything else.
I don't get that, but anyways.
Well, I'm not that kind of player either, but I know some of those people, and I can get that because it's that good of a game. I actually think that a World at War might actually play faster, but I'm not 100% convinced of that either. ID Jester mentions the Warstrom series. I assume he means the War Storm series. I believe that's Nick Escooby's design, if I'm not misremembering that.
The artist?
Yeah, I think so. So that's interesting. Yes. Oh, here's some. Thank you for the music, Dan. I meant to mention that.
Thank you very much.
It's a big hit. People know it's you immediately. Canadians added World War I to World in Flames. So I'm not sure who designed that. Actually, wasn't what's his name from Stellar Horizons involved in the World War I WIF variant, which is called. Oh, I can't remember. And somebody will mention it in the chat. I've never owned it. I know Callendale said that WIF feels more like a World War I game than a World War II game. And I think he's right, except that there are mechanisms in WIF to make it look like a World War II game. And I'm talking about the offensive points and stuff like that. Ken mentions that the war is the best step forward after Advanced Third Reich. He might be right. It's an attractive looking game.
Who published that? The War.
That's from Compass. Matt Taylor says most of the current squad World War II minis game rules suck, and some board games would make better minis rules. That's probably. I mean, to be okay. So bear in mind that I'm making this statement from a position of 99.2% total ignorance. I have never seen a World War II minis game that looks interesting in any way. They are all. Well, there's exceptions. There's Command Decision, which a lot of people speak very highly of, but I've never played, so I can't comment on it. But there's like that one minis game that you see all the time at the hobby shops. I've looked at that. That looks like it's very superficial. It's Warhammer with Panzers.
What about the Sergeant's game from PSC?
That's neat, but it's also not. It's not my kind of thing. If you're into like just a kind of beer and pretzel, super fast playing type of thing, it's like minis in the sense that they're little stand-ups.
Okay.
And that's neat. The components are actually quite neat. If that's what you want, then it is a good choice. And some people play whatever that World War II miniatures thing is called. People like that. And that's cool. I don't think that's interesting. So, Blitz, a world in conflict. I have not really looked at that. I'm happy to play the regular WIF. So, Absolute Victory. No, that's not it. I can't remember what it's called. Fatal Alliances. Okay, so Fatal Alliances is the World War I World in Flames variant. Absolute Victory is another thing that was done by Compass. It is World War II. And it's interesting. It's an interesting looking design. It's got relatively ugly maps. The maps are pretty ghastly looking. But it's the only World War II game that I could think of that has a map for Antarctica. So there's that. And it's an event-driven game. There's like this huge book of events, and the events are cool. I mean, it's almost worth buying the game to read the events book.
I love events.
The event, I spent like half an hour leafing through that thing at a convention one time. It's a hoot just to look at the events. So I'd kind of like to try Absolute Victory for that reason, even though I think the map is ugly. I didn't know that. I guess that's not surprising. That this is a thing that the plotted movement was a thing that SPI did probably more often than anybody else, actually.
Well, it sounds like a Ranger there. What's that game from Omega?
Yeah, that was Omega Games. That's drawn some attention recently, actually. I keep seeing that mentioned in the last 6 months or so. Ranger, that is.
Yeah.
The plotted movement is basically everybody writes down their moves and then you execute them all at the same time.
Right.
I could think of SPI games that did that. I mean, Flat Top kind of does that too. Like Star Force did that. That was my introduction to plotted movement games.
What's the Heinlein book game?
Starship Troopers.
Yeah,
that doesn't have spot. That doesn't have. Well, not that I recall. It's
don't you have to like when you're underground or something plot your.
That's true. You gotta. There's like some underground thing that you gotta sketch out or something like that. I forget. It's been 30 years since I've looked at that game. I didn't notice that, but I haven't really looked at it. So there's a lot of people that speak very highly. There's miniatures rules, command decision. It's a Frank Chadwick design. Frank is, of course, one of the all-time great wargame designers, in my opinion. So I am not going to badmouth command decision, other than to say I don't know enough about it.
What about Frank's latest game there? That was from Victory Points. Now it's on GMT.
Yeah, Thunder in the East.
What do you say about
Thunder in the East?
So look, it's 50% off. I can get that for 50% off. Yes,
yeah, it's about $62.50. Okay, I think you're going to spend quite a bit of time figuring it out. But I think there's a good game there. It is a big game, but it's not as big as a lot of people think it is. A lot of people are folks want to compare it to Fire in the East, the Europa game, and it is about half the footprint of Fire in the East. It's still big. It's 4 maps, but it's about half the footprint of Fire in the East. So it's not as big. It doesn't take as long to play or any of that, but it is what I would call a modestly sized monster game. So bear that in mind. But I think there is a good game there. I think there's revised rules that are floating around on the internet, so you can check those out. I had it and I got rid of it, and I was actually it was the one thing that I was most tempted by in their sale was to get another copy of it.
You already have a copy?
I got rid of it. I forget what I did with it. I might have sold it actually. I got it secondhand anyway. So
okay.
But I do think there's a good game there, and I'm very interested to see the whole thing together. That once they have the whole war out, which is of course sort of the unfulfilled potential of Europa. I know people tried to do it. I'm gonna step out on a limb and say I don't think it probably worked.
What's the big whoop about Europa?
So. Some of the very early war games from GDW were a pair of games called Drangnach Osten and Untenscheid, which together gave you basically the entire war in the East on 6 maps. Okay. I think it was 6 maps. And they revised those later and used the system as the basis for the Europa series. A lot of the mystique that surrounds Europa is because of the East Front Europa. There is no comparable game except maybe War in the East from SPI, and then even then not quite, that will let you play out the entire East Front War on that kind of scale. There's nothing else that will really do it. And nobody else has done it because it's stupidly large and takes years to play. So it's very difficult to play. So a lot of the other, I mean, the dream of Europa, if you will, was to have the entire European War playable at that 16 miles to the hex scale. So they did a lot of the games that you would need as pieces to do that, but they didn't do them all. You never got there was at least one piece that they never got to. I mean, there was Grand Europa, which was the thing that was supposed to tie it all together at the end, which they never did. Some informal rules are floating around. But the footprint on this, the footprint just on the East Front is huge. Okay,
16 miles to the hex, for God's sake.
Yeah, the footprint. Well, and it's the whole East Front, right? It's like a 9-foot long map with maybe 7.5 feet.
But isn't that just overkill? 16 miles.
Yeah, I mean, well, don't forget, you've got three components to scale. You've got the map scale, you've got the unit scale, and you've got the time scale. Now, this time scale is 2 turns to the month, which is very compact, actually. But then the unit scale for 16 miles to the hex seems really bloated to me. We got all these different subdivisional units, and you got breakdowns and all this other stuff. And it becomes a lot of trouble to play. It plays very slowly. It is not speedy. It is the kind of thing where, hey, it's your turn. I'm gonna go get something to eat, take a nap, and go to the movies, and I'll come back after I've seen.
Seriously?
Yeah. Oh, I'm not even. That's maybe a tiny exaggeration, but not by much.
Man.
So, but again, there's all kind of primitive bits in the rules because it's a 1973 design. But that East Front, especially, this is true of other parts of it too, but it's most true and most obviously true of the East Front, where nothing else gives you that same experience of playing it at that scale. It's going to take you 2 years of real time to play through it.
Seriously?
That's my estimate. Yeah. I mean, assuming you play from 1941, like June 22nd, 1941, to say the end of 1944, by which time I think a winner should be determinable. I think it's going to take you about 2 years. Now, there's a significant amount of change, so I get this disclaimer out. There's a significant differences between Drangnak Austin and Untenschied, the original games, and Fire in the East and Scorched Earth, which were the revised versions. Fire in the East and Scorched Earth added a lot of extra stuff. And then I think Total War, which was going to be the new Fire in the East, which is that legendary thing that's never going to come out, he added even more stuff. And the maps are nice, though. I mean, I've seen the maps, actually, that they're nice.
Who's the designer of Europa?
John Estelle and Frank Chadwick, I think, were the original designers. I could be wrong about that, but there's a lot of people who have had their hands in that over the years. So don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. I know Frank was involved. Let me put it that way. So, other tactical stuff, Ancients or Napoleonic. We actually did mention other topics earlier before we got distracted. Like the Ancients. I mean, when I think of Ancients tactical, I of course go to Great Battles of History, but there's all kinds of other examples. Commands and Colors Ancients. What is the scale of Commands and Colors Ancients, actually? There is an answer to this question, but nobody knows because it's intentionally abstracted by Richard Board. It's actually super clever. The scale is kind of depends on the battle, right? The really big battles, the scale is bigger, and the really small battles, the scale is smaller because the actual number of pieces and the size of the map are the same every time.
That's right.
So, or close to it, right? So it's actually a really clever piece of design work that and it's even more impressive because it actually doesn't break. It actually does work. So scale is not necessarily the kind of rigid thing that necessarily it necessarily needs to be, but it can create issues with things like Europa, where the unit scale does not match the hex scale. So,
yeah, it depends on the battle. Tom Clark says
it does. It does. On Napoleonics, we talked about this too. Tactical Napoleonics tends to mean the battalion scale with things like La Bataille, stuff like that. And of course, I think it's probably true that more Napoleonic era battles are simulated in La Bataille than in any other system, even though the games are like 1 to a box as opposed to the 4 or 6 to a box from the OSG series. But there's been so many La Bataille games from several different publishers using several different rule sets over the years that I think La Bataille might have better coverage. Jour de Gloire might have even better coverage. And I want to say that that is a regimental system. I might be wrong about that. I think it's regimental. It sounds right. Might even be brigade, but I think it's regimental.
Matt Taylor, look at Matt Taylor's comment. Blue Max? Is he talking about the game Blue Max?
The GDW Blue Max, I presume.
The little game, the little thin box game.
Yeah. Yeah, but if you're playing weekly turns in a campaign, yeah, it might take you a long time to play. That's the kind of thing that might be played very entertainingly by mail or email or something like that, too.
Wilderness War. E4 Airman asks me if I've ever... What is Wilderness War?
Wilderness War is the Volko Ruhnke design on the French and Indian War.
No, I haven't.
I haven't either. It is a very well-regarded game, I can tell you that. And I think it is the precursor to the precursor of Coin, if you will. It's the game that Volko did before Labyrinth, which then, of course, he went on to do Coin and revolutionize GMT's warehouse space, if nothing else.
Yeah. He's the
metagaming sticks and stones. Yeah, that is not something I would do. But it is kind of the perfect type of thing for metagaming in those little tiny minis.
Yeah.
So there's that. I mean, it's a good fit for their format, and I'm guessing they can't possibly have sold that many.
But that's a really old game here.
Well, everything from metagaming is old. They've been out of business since about 1983 or 1984.
Wasn't Steve Jackson involved in metagaming?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it was his company, but a bunch of the early Steve Jackson stuff did come out from metagaming, and he just recovered the rights to some of that stuff in the last few years. That's the Fantasy Trip thing, where you've got that Volkswagen-sized box of Fantasy Trip stuff that you can stumble over in the game store now. Computer Ambush, no, never did. Was it actually a computer version of Victory Games Ambush? Because that's kind of cool, if so. So there's several different. Are we talking about La Bataille here? It's a pretty big game. There's at least 3 versions of it. There's the current version from Clash of Arms, and there's the original version, which is La Bataille de la Moskva, if we're talking about the same thing. So army group scale game. Your best bet on this is Struggle for Europe. Is that what it's called? From Worthington? I think that's what it's called. It's not strictly army group, but it's that high a level that I think if you're looking for a World War II game that's that high a level, I think that's where you look. So yeah, there you go. That's the game I'm talking about. And it also does exactly what it says on the box. You play World War II in Europe in 2 hours. And it comes down. I've played it twice. It came down to the last turn both times.
And it's point to point.
Yes. It's not really my thing, but it's really good for what it is.
I'm impressed with Worthington, man.
No, the components are top notch too. The new edition of Soviet Dawn has started to percolate out to audience members as well, and that looks very well done.
Yeah, I was gonna get it, but I have 2 versions of that.
I have 1 version of that. That's why I didn't get it. Melee and Wizard, yeah, those are tactical games. They are really fantasy war games, not RPGs. It was the Fantasy Trip that turned it into an RPG.
What about that air game? What's it called there?
Regiments to Brigades. But I could see, or battalions to brigades is tactical for Napoleonics. At least for most Napoleonics. I've never seen a company level Napoleonic game. Doesn't mean there isn't one, but I haven't seen it if there is. I mean, I've seen regimental. So like the Eagles of France games from Hexasim are regimental, as I recall, and they're tactical games, I think.
Here's a man-to-man tactical game.
Ace of Aces. Yeah, I mean it's plane to plane anyway. Yeah, so hot plane on plane action. Okay, so maybe that's not the thing I'm thinking of then. So yeah, that's not. I mean, I think the only early computer war game I did was Gary Grigsby's War in Russia, which I did not have a favorable opinion of at the time. But I have a very favorable opinion of Gary Grigsby's War in the East. It's available now. War in the East 2 I haven't played. So, all right, we are out of time. So I would like to thank everybody for tuning in. What are we going to talk about next week, Dan?
I don't know, but I learned a lot today, man.
Your sister's ass. So... So we don't have to talk about that, but let's hope.
But I learned a lot today. Let me tell you,
Good.
man. Let me tell you.
Always the goal.
Yeah, I learned a lot. I don't remember anything, but I learned a lot.
Well, that's cool. Eventually, we'll keep saying the same things week after week, and eventually you'll remember them. It'll be fine.
Because drinking, it affects your memory, and it also affects your memory.
I know I'm drinking. I know I'm not going anywhere tonight, so I'm going to make BLT sandwiches after this. And
Jeff Beeler says he wants to talk about strategic games.
That was almost this week. We can do that. Strategic level World War II games. Okay, I could talk about that for an hour. Okay. Not a problem.
Okay.
All right, cool. Jeff Beeler is the winner of the week. You have to pick the topic. All right, so very good. So thanks, everybody, for stopping by. We got 54 people, which is fantastic. I would like to thank each and every one of you for stopping by, and anybody that commented in the chat, especially. So
thank you very much.
These things work on robust chat participation. So everybody have a great night.